Welcome to Uncanny X-Minutes, where we bring you the comics behind the movies. I'm Sasha.
I'm producer James.
And this week we are watching X2 X-Men United, minutes 110 to 120.
Ooh.
We're really close to the end.
So close to the end.
Well, James, what happens in these 10 minutes?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. In these 10 minutes, we are escaping from the Weapon X facility because the dam's breaking.
Uh-oh.
Wolverine confronts Stryker for the final time, and Jean Grey sacrifices herself.
Brian asked me, he's like, is this the Phoenix movie? And I was like, no, but yes.
You know, and is it issue 100 that she sacrifices herself or something like that?
So.
But then 101 she comes back as the Phoenix, like
it's the split, right?
It's the split. This is like the 100 of it all.
Right, because she starts with the headaches that we've talked about earlier, and then yeah.
But here's the fun part. We're not going to talk about 100.
No. Because
100 kind of happens in Dark Phoenix.
That's true.
So we'll talk about it then. Because why would I talk about it now?
No, we should definitely talk about it when it's like the movie of it all, right?
The movie actually did. Well, because that was the thing about this time around. This was we're almost going to do it, but not quite.
Mm-hmm. That's how most of them are doing things.
And that's fine, you know, because it happens in space.
Yeah.
And you don't...
They weren't doing space.
We ain't messing with space. That's fine. It's fine. I will tell you this, though. When this movie came out, I was under the assumption that Jean Grey has been dead for a long time in the comics.
Okay.
And I think at this point in the comics, she may have still been alive.
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
And then shortly thereafter, like when I picked up comics again, she was dead.
It happens.
But that's the thing, though. It's right up there. It is one of those things I thought was like a universal truth. Like
Jean Grey is always dead.
Jean Grey is dead. Uncle Ben is dead.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like she's one of those characters. Gwen Stacy is dead.
I think Jean Grey's death is, quote unquote, deaths, plural, are outside in terms of like social importance than it is to the actual comic importance because, as we have mentioned, she comes back a lot. A lot of the X-Men do that.
Sure. But they all have different reasons. So usually her stuff comes back because of Phoenix related. Like she's the one who has the plot behind her of like, oh, we need her to come back. Well, guess what? Guess the Phoenix came back. Woo!
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So at first I wanted to do a bunch of like when Jean has died, like in the comics. And as I looked it up, I was like, oh, it's actually not as many as I thought it would be. Yeah, I thought there were bigger iconic deaths.
No, she's got one really big one and a couple of other ones that happen.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I thought it would be a more interesting topic, and it really doesn't have as much meat as I thought it would.
Yeah.
Because when she sacrifices herself as like the whole Phoenix thing, that is like one of the big ones, and it's the one we keep thinking of, and the Dark Phoenix sacrificing. You know, like killing the Dark Phoenix and killing Jean are like two of the big deaths that we will get to when Phoenix happens.
Right, yeah. The other ones are maybe not as interesting.
No. So I figured we weren't. The other thing that I, like, as a moviegoer that had enough knowledge in the comics, got skewed was the Weapon X facility location.
Okay.
Alkali Lake is not where it is in the comics.
I don't remember where it is in the comic. That is not my particular forte.
It's not anywhere like particular. It's still in Canada.
Okay, it is still in Canada.
It still is in Canada, but
right.
it's in Alberta, Canada.
Okay, that
near the town of Roanoke.
Okay.
Alkali Lake, nothing to do with the comics.
That's just totally a movie invention.
So when you go and look up, Alkali Lake, X-Men, it is just like, I found articles that are like all the crazy stuff that happened to Alkali Lake, and I looked at it and it was like the movie wiki. Or everything was like movie related. It's like, we keep coming back to this location that does not exist. I mean, the facility exists.
Right, but not
which is why we
is.
keep going to it. But it's like, but we don't call it the facility. We call it Alkali Lake.
Right.
And so my movie brain was like, oh, that must be what it is in the comics. We talk about it so much. It's got to be a comic thing.
It is. It is an interesting, and like maybe you could illuminate in terms of like maybe from a filmmaking perspective of why they would be so specific about it, because I feel like to be generic is fine.
Right. If you look at the comics, it's probably not drawn in a very iconic looking location.
Yeah, that tracks.
You know?
It's like a gray building.
Right. It's just a building somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think for them, they're like, oh, let's put it somewhere interesting in Canada.
Sure.
And I think they, in my opinion, just picked a place.
Okay. That makes sense. Just make it pretty.
It's an interesting, that's the thing though, is that it's stuck out. You know, like as a moviegoer, I could have told you where the Weapon X facility is. As a comic book reader, I had to look it up.
Right, yeah. I the only thing I know at the Weapon X facility, I'm like, oh, it's someplace in Canada, which is very American of me. And I'm like, Canada, somewhere.
Yeah. Sure.
Anyway.
But I mean, those were my big things where I was just like, my misconceptions as a movie watcher.
Yeah.
That over time has been like rudely moved out of the way to be like, no.
I think I've benefited generally from not being so interested in the movies as much. So though sometimes I'll find that some of the other X-Men media will bleed into and make me misremember things from the comic books, like the animated series, especially because I was so young when I was watching it. Yeah. Like it will affect like my general understanding of like
the Claremont run.
I've read it so many times, and like sometimes, you know, the TV show will just overwrite my memory. Memory's a faulty thing.
Yeah, right.
So
you're like, yeah, Nightcrawler wasn't there. No, he was there.
Yeah, right.
He was there.
Well, and Nightcrawler, you know, Excalibur, whatever. Yeah. Anyway, but I brought something I wanted to talk about since we can't talk about Phoenix. We got to talk about her boyfriends.
Well, because I believe in this 10 minutes they have like kind of a heart to heart. Like since Jean has sacrificed herself, like Scott kind of breaks down and Logan's there for him.
It is really sweet.
And Wolverine even says something to the effect of like, oh, she chose you.
Right. Yeah. He solidifies it.
Oh, man.
And it's brutal. You know, that's the Wolverine character, right?
Yeah.
Like he's whatever.
He's pining.
But he knows.
Yeah.
He knows the choice. And he understands. And a lot of times in the comics, he knows that is the correct choice for her. So like he's not even that mad about it.
Yeah.
Which, you know, you got to respect that.
The one thing I want to say about like an earlier minute where Jean goes, you know, the girl doesn't pick the bad boy, she picks the good guy, and I want to be like, oh, you're making Scott such a like Boy Scout.
Yeah. Where
like if you read even the Stan Lee run, like everybody's pining over Jean. And Scott is too, but Scott's just like, you know what, I'm not going to get in her way because, like, everybody's into her. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to throw my hat in that ring. And she's like, why won't he?
Yeah.
I like him.
He's
like,
the only one that won't throw his hat in the ring.
So that's a whole thing for so long.
Yeah. The thing is, I feel like Scott gets away. He's not really, the Boy Scout thing really comes from the animated series.
And that's
certain periods of time
which bleeds into this movie.
Yeah. They're that's what they did. They watched, you know, whatever. They didn't read any comic books or something, right? Didn't they say that?
They watched the entire animated series for sure.
That's where they're pulling, right? So they have that issue.
I will give it to James Marsden did admit to reading a bunch of comics.
Oh, that's good.
And I think he was like one of the few actors that was like, oh yeah, no, I read a bunch in preparation.
Good idea. But yeah, I think unfortunately for Jean Grey, not to make this a Scott episode, but like I think Scott Summers is the most interesting in the time where he is dating Emma Frost.
Yeah. I think that's where it solidified my love of him.
Yeah.
Is in that era.
Right. The Utopia era.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that little bit right before Jean Grey dies during that era, as we were mentioning.
The new X-Men?
Yeah. Between New X-Men, he's dating
the
Jean
Grant
Grey.
Morrison run.
The Grant Morrison run. And, you know, Emma Frost, but they're both there. So Emma Frost is there too.
Yeah.
And that's when this drama starts happening between the three of them, right? Like there's it's a mess. But the point is, after that era, through Utopia and throughout and after that, when he's with Emma Frost, he's so much more interesting.
Yeah.
And because he's complicated and he also has a different kind of role. So let's talk about this because this also bleeds into the Wolverine and Scott Summers thing. We're going to talk about Schism.
Yeah.
So this is important. So Schism is basically when Scott Summers and Wolverine like kind of split the X-Men.
This is in 2011, to give you a nice little time frame of where we are.
And this is what leads into the run that I cannot stop talking about, which is Wolverine and the X-Men. But this is before that.
Yeah, this is before that. So this is the Utopia run. This is the asteroid M has been pulled down into the San Francisco Bay. This is right after Hope. So the No More Mutants thing is on its way up, but not huge.
There is, I think, quoted, I don't say I think, I know, 200 mutants in existence, according to Scott Summers, during this run.
Right.
So there's still not that many of them.
So it's not quite Krakoa. It's not like a big island nation, but they are sort of all holed up in one location.
Right. And it's
more like a fortified bunker than it is like a nation.
Yeah. They refer to it, like other characters in the U.S. government refer to it as the big house with the big lawn, because like, and what's happening during this era is that Scott Summers is effectively the leader of the nation. When Scott Summers, my thought is when Scott Summers is with the X-Men at the X-Mansion, he's always kind of subsidiary to Professor Xavier, in my opinion. That's just, it's Xavier's school.
He's the field leader.
Yeah.
But Professor X is the boss.
When we move to Utopia, that changes. That dynamic shifts. In Prelude to Schism, which is a really fascinating miniseries that leads into this. It basically follows Scott around as he gets advice from Professor Xavier, Magneto, and then Wolverine and Emma Frost. And as he's making this decision as to whether or not he needs everybody to stay and defend Utopia or if he wants to evacuate his people. The context of that is not really important. What is important is that Xavier even says in that run that Scott has evolved past him as terms of the leader of mutant kind, because again, he can be. There's only 200 of them.
Yeah.
So it's
and I'm sure really a lot of them are there.
Most of them are there. So he becomes this kind of weird president representative. He tries to not take that on. A lot of times in Schism, when he's talking to government agencies or whatever, he's like, I'm not their king. I can't control every mutant out there. I can tell them not to do things, but I can't physically stop them from doing things.
Right. There's no consequences if they don't follow what I'm saying.
Right. But you can tell he is kind of leading them. And you can also tell by how Xavier treats him, how Magneto treats him. They defer to his decisions. And also how Wolverine treats him, which is markedly different than in the early comics, right?
Yep.
You remember in the first couple of comics that we've talked about, Wolverine is you can't tell me what to do. Who do you think you are? That's literally a common refrain.
Yeah.
And they reference that in these comic books about we've come a long way or whatever. We've come a long way and we're about to get to the point, hence Schism, where Wolverine turns away from Scott's vision of the future. But ultimately, they're building this relationship where Wolverine trusts Scott to the point where he's in the position where how Wolverine used to treat Xavier, which is crazy. It's such a huge journey and such a kind of a turn for that character. It just shows you how far Wolverine and Scott's relationship has come from the early bickering, right?
Yeah.
And they build it up that high so they can so it's so much more tragic when Schism happens.
Well, when you introduce Wolverine, he's kind of a bad boy mystery man anyway. So he is the opposite of, he's the foil of Cyclops. He is there to be no, we don't do things. What are you talking about? I'm gonna go kill something.
Yeah, exactly.
He's
never listening to orders.
But the mysteriousness of it is you don't know enough about this guy that that's all you know. You just know him being the nah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, you don't get the soft side where he tells
and that's
Scott.
But that's the journey that you were just talking about. When going into Schism, that's when you start seeing more of the bigger brother to some of the younger mutants.
Yeah.
One of the new... So, rewinding back to Hope stuff again. After the... Second Coming. After Second Coming, we are now getting lights... Cerebro's lighting up again.
Yeah.
And there's 5 lights is what they say. And it's 5 new mutants that are now hanging out with Hope. And one of them is Edie. And Edie is, I don't know if you've seen, I know you have, but I don't know if the audience has seen My Hero Academia. she is, there's one character on there that can control fire and ice. He's got like white hair and red hair. It's like split in half. Her costume looks like that. It's green. It's like blue on one side and orange on the other, but she can do both. But she is kind of had a broken childhood.
Yeah.
And Wolverine sees this, and it becomes a big part of like what happens going forward. Right.
Yeah. Like Edie is kind of like, that's the turning point of why their relationship starts to fracture. And
we forgot her when we were talking about like father figures that are, big brother figures that Wolverine has been on.
Yeah.
Because it's not a huge one is the problem. It's big in Schism.
Yeah.
And in a little bit in Wolverine the X-Men, but like it peters off.
In Wolverine the X-Men, the focus shifts from Edie to Quentin Quire as like the character that Wolverine is trying to like bring, like little chick, like let's have you grow up a little bit here. And yeah, I feel like the movie is trying to, it's not the same storyline, but the movie is trying to set up that emotional moment between these characters where you're like, oh, there's a soft spot with Wolverine with Scott while he's in mourning.
Yeah.
And like they are more than their love triangle, right?
Yeah. And
in Schism, it's a little bit different because we're past the love triangle thing because Jean Grey's not there. It's Emma Frost, and
she hasn't been there for a while,
right? And so, what it is about like instead of it being about Jean Grey and like that's what brings them together in the comics, it's about how their vision of the kids, the mutant children, is like. How they come together to try to take care of the mutants, and also why they split apart because they have completely different visions, right? I see how that would be hard to do in a movie.
Oh,
right?
No, you can't do that in a movie.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's tough because like we have talked about where this ends up, because where it does end up is Cyclops, quote unquote, becoming Magneto and recruiting children that are popping up as mutants to fight on the side of mutants. And Wolverine is trying to get mutants and put them in a school. Yeah. And he's the Professor X of it all, trying to make them, to protect them, to show them how to use their powers, and to be good citizens of, the world.
He wants to give them a childhood. And at this point, the reason for Schism is Edie is, like we mentioned, is the main focus, is that like she ends up killing people, members of the Hellfire Club, who are there to attack. So it's not like...
It's not unwarranted.
It's not necessarily unwarranted, but...
I think they do a little bit editorializing. It is at an event that like all the heavy hitters are at, and they all get taken out.
Yeah, and she's the last one.
And she's the last one.
And you have Wolverine, who wasn't there. He was at a bar.
Yeah.
Instead of being at the event, and he's running. He's psychically talking to Cyclops, being like, send her out of there. I'm almost there. Don't make her do this. And that starts that fracture, right?
Well, because Cyclops is also like, no, that's if you don't do it, others will get hurt.
Right.
Like they both have points.
Absolutely.
But the heartbreak of it all, it is the one character that obviously they showed earlier in the storyline to have kind of been have a broken childhood. Like she never grew up. There's a line earlier where Wolverine's like, they're all waiting for him because he's supposed to teach class, but he came back from like whatever adventure he was going on, and he looks beat to all crap.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, why don't you go play with dolls or something? And she's like, I had a doll once. They burned it when they thought I was a witch, basically.
Yeah.
And you're like, ugh.
And he gives her a doll later because he's like trying to piece her childhood back together. Again, these are the soft spots of Wolverine. Like, and I get the movies. There's not that many. I mean, like, there's the kids in the school, but we don't get that. Like, it wouldn't really make sense to make it about them in this movie.
It would have to be Rogue, but Rogue had a good childhood until she ran away.
Right. So I think keeping it kind of still about Jean Grey is fine for the movie because, like, these are the only characters that have gotten like significant amount of screen time where we can be like, okay, we got to show this feeling of like softness and caring about the team. From Wolverine, which, by the way, maybe remind you, that has not been the vibe for like a movie and a half.
Not at all. Like not at all. It has been a rivalry the entire time up to this point.
Right. And I think that, well, I won't spoil the next movie, but I feel like...
I think we always spoil the next movie.
Do. But I feel like I wish they had taken this as the point to lead into the next movie.
Yeah.
I feel like the thing was, like, is Wolverine's softness was shown through their love triangle. And instead of being like, oh, let's make the next movie about, like, this new connection, but, like, external complicating factors that might, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
They're like, what if we just made it still a love triangle movie, though?
Kind of. But then they also, like, kill off Scott really quickly.
Yeah. Well...
Can't really have a love triangle. One guy's in mourning, and then when he's finally not in mourning, he's dead.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that next season. Oh boy.
Well, Wolverine has to win the love triangle. Everybody knows this. Like,
you know, that's all Hugh Jackman's fault for being so darn charming.
X-Men really has that problem where they have, like, one actor that is, like, particularly charismatic or gets particularly famous, and then they build the entire movie around them to the detriment of their entire series.
I don't know what you're talking about, Mystique later. What?
I don't know what to say, but it's just so true.
It is. And that's the thing, like, when we get into those later ones where it's, like, so Mystique heavy.
Yes.
Like, we'll talk about how that's kind of not what it should be, or not that it's not what it should be, but it doesn't match up with the comics, I should say.
Yeah, it's also kind of like Mystique. We've talked about her before. You can go back to some other episodes where we just specifically talk about her. Mystique is so interesting and so complicated, and they tried to make her interesting and complicated and did not. Like, I personally did not like how she ended up.
Well, it's tough because it's not even close. Like, we've talked about what her history and past looks like.
Yeah.
And they just sort of like, yeah, but what if she was just a sister figure?
Right. You're like, okay. Yeah. I think that I will say I really feel like James Marsters did a really good job as Cyclops for, like, if you're basing it off of the animated series.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, he did a good animated series.
He did
Cyclops.
a really good animated series Cyclops. I do think, kind of talking back to this movie, the fact that he's based on the animated series Cyclops is also kind of a detriment.
Yeah.
Because he's less interesting, right?
Well, like, he's not really a leader.
Right.
He's not a tactician. You know, like...
There's less moves. There's less, like, organizing.
Yeah.
Like... I don't know. Does it really seem like, just to go back where we were talking about in Schism, it's, like, very obvious that Wolverine is reporting to Scott Summers in Utopia.
Yeah.
That is just a factual thing. He calls him his lieutenant, literally.
But it is the, like, I may not agree with you, but for the most part, he goes along with a lot of the stuff that Scott is kind of ordering him to do. So, Scott's like, all right, I need to go to this arms... What was the conference? It was like
like it was the advanced arms like the de-armament, like something like conference.
It was all about basically Scott is trying to get in front of the governments of the world and being like, hey man, y'all need to disassemble, do whatever. All of these sentinels everyone has.
Yeah.
And they're all like, we don't have sentinels. What are you even talking about? So part of it is he goes, hey, Wolverine, you need to come with me. You need to be my bodyguard. And he's like, I just got back.
Yeah.
This is part of that. Like, I just got back from a mission. I am so hurt and I need to sleep for like 2 days straight. And he's like, you can sleep on the jet. Yeah. And it's like, and Wolverine, like, he is in his bed in his underwear and he's just like, okay, and he puts a shirt on and keeps getting. Then he follows him out. So it is like, I respect what you are saying. I will be there for you, and he is there for him when he's there.
Yeah, and he's like obviously the lieutenant or the bodyguard or however you want to call it. In the movies, that is not the case, which I get, especially early on, where you, like in the early comics, Wolverine and in the anime series, which we know they watched as reference.
Yeah.
Wolverine isn't taking orders like that.
No.
Like he is in the comics here. But I think it really, at this point in like the end of, 2, you would kind of hope that Scott is showing some sort of leadership.
Nope.
But they don't.
No.
And I feel like that is kind of a loss because I feel like Scott's character is more interesting when he he feels like he has the weight on his shoulders and he acts that way.
Yeah.
I would also like to see it sitting there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like when you watch the movie, it's like, well, okay, but are you really more responsible than the other adults in this room here? Not really.
Well, and that is the problem of following. Like, if you look at every X-Men movie poster that Hugh Jackman is in, he's in the front and center. And if you read X-Men comic books, he's not always in the front and center.
Yeah, there was a little bit of time.
Sure, but not if you look at all the big event books that have happened over the years. He's not the one in the front of every one of them.
No.
Because he's popularly put him in other things, but like the X-Men have him, but they're not just him. And the movies suffer from that because you also only get 2 hours. So when you only have 2 hours, you have to sacrifice this kind of stuff, which is what makes X-Men, which is a real bummer.
Yeah, because it's like, yes, you had to cut these like really minutia, like little bits of character development between people and like social hierarchy and stuff like that to make a short enough movie.
It also feels like they're not a well-versed team in these movies.
Definitely. Yes.
Which is kind of a bummer. Like when we get into the next one, Wolverine kind of becomes in a movie that has Storm in it.
Yeah.
Wolverine is the leader.
Know. Don't talk to me about it.
Like we'll get into Storm being a leader next movie because that's what it should have been if we were. And it's not even a case of like that never happened in the comics. It's more of a like that's not what the characters are.
Right.
It's a fundamental misunderstanding of where we're coming from.
Yeah.
And that is Scott too. Like it is the Scott Wolverine relationship. Like you said, these movies are just the love triangle.
Yeah.
And not anything else.
And I am sympathetic because like you said, you've got a 2 hour movie. And I think for most things when you're adapting it, kind of clearing out just like some of the minutia of like the social interactions generally is fine. For X-Men, that's what people are coming to the comics for, though.
They didn't know that.
That's the issue,
that's the problem.
Right? And it's kind of hard. And I feel like that's why these movies maybe get a worse rap from people who like X-Men comics than people who have just watched the movies and like they're fine. They're like fine.
Yeah.
Early 2000s. Why do people hate these so much? And it's because like your expectations of like what you're gonna get and what you got, and they don't always line up.
There's a similar thing that I've heard people say about like Star Trek. So like the Star Trek Next Generation show is a lot more philosophical and like social dynamics and like what happens when you have an alien species that yada yada yadas and we get messed up and around in it. And then you get to the movies. Yeah. And the movies are like, well, let's get a phaser and go shoot it.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that's not what the show ever was, you know? Like we need to get back to a bit of that, but 2 hours of relationship drama would be awesome for us.
For like
for
me
us.
in particular.
Yeah. But maybe it wouldn't work as well for like the modern audience.
Yeah.
Because like you look at New Mutants.
Right.
Is not fighting all the time. It is more drama amongst the teens. And a lot of people are like, I hate that movie. It was one of the worst. And I was like, right, but
I kind of liked it. I mean, know.
It wasn't 100% accurate, but it was the closest to what a New Mutants movie is probably going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't love the tone, but we've talked about that.
Yeah.
Like but I think you're right in that like.
But there is more relationship drama in New Mutants than there is in like any of these X-Men. Maybe not any of them, but like
yeah, I know what you mean.
But like in X-Men 2, there's none of that.
Right. I really liked like all of the. There's not enough like man versus self in these movies. Yeah. And that's like X-Men obviously has a lot of like external enemies, like we've talked about this, but it is also about the internal drama. Like one of the running jokes from S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers is like, are the X-Men fighting amongst themselves again? Like that's the bit in Marvel, like as the joke for other comic books is because it's like a messy soap opera. Like whenever S.H.I.E.L.D. has to call the Xavier Institute, there's literally jokes about like, oh my God, I hate calling them, you know, like.
There is, I gotta say, in Schism, it is interesting because one of the, like, after the arms meeting.
Yeah.
So we have talked about this storyline, actually, with Quentin Quire going in and basically truth bombing everyone.
Yeah.
Causing all of the politicians around the world to divulge their deepest, darkest secrets.
They don't like it.
And the retaliation is they all are like, originally we're saying we don't have Sentinels. They all unleashed the Sentinels they have, which were garbage Sentinels.
Yeah.
There was only 25% that worked.
Yeah.
I think it was a 75% defective Sentinel population that got activated. And in that, there is a lot of Avengers in the background helping out.
Yeah.
Which is that, like, are you kidding me? Like, what are you guys doing? And now we have to clean up your mess.
Yeah.
And you don't see that too often.
No, not
You usually see Captain America showing up and causing some nonsense that's like, the government doesn't like what you're doing, sir.
Yes. Yeah. Someone sent me I think it was Brian, really funny. It's just like Captain America in his own comics, and it's like, oh, it was you. It was you. And it's just like this, like, it was glorious guy.
So it was, yes, it was Captain America in Avengers comics, and it's Superman.
Yeah.
And it was Captain America in X-Men comics, and it's Homelander from The Boys.
And that is accurate. It was. I've mentioned this before. I'll say it again. But I had such a hatred for Captain America, and when my husband, when we were dating, he was like, "Oh, I love Captain America," and I like side-eyed him so hard. And it wasn't till years later that I realized that it's because I've had anti-Captain America propaganda because all I read is X-Men. And he's like, "Why do you think he's such a jerk?" And I was like, "He is a jerk." And Brian's like, "What is wrong? What are you reading?" It's like X-Men.
Yup.
So I read other Captain America comics later. I'm like, oh, okay, this is
I wasn't that bad.
Some bad PR.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Not wrong though.
I love, there are questions every once in a while online that are like, why don't the Avengers ever help out the X-Men? It's like, because they don't want to get messed in that business. And it's that kind of stuff where it's like, when they do have to show up, it's usually under official business.
Yeah.
And it's
Phoenix
not
5.
good.
Yeah, it's usually real bad.
It's real bad.
And it's usually like, I don't know. I mean, like, the end of Krakoa, Captain America does show up to help. I mean, it's not like they never do.
True.
But it is like, it's a lot of mess that I think a lot of the other superheroes are like trying to like
stay
hands
out
off
of
a little bit.
There are a couple runs of Uncanny Avengers, which is a mix of Avengers and X-Men on a team together. And those are fun.
Yeah. I think in the Norman Osborn Dark Adventures, technically Daken is on that team.
Yeah.
So like that's kind of a mix too.
He's their Wolverine.
Yeah, because Wolverine was on Avengers for a while. Yeah.
Anyway. All right. Well, I think that's probably about it.
Yeah, that's about it. Well, thank you for listening. I'm Sasha.
I'm producer James.
And we'll see you for the next 10.